Sai Ram and welcome to Tryst with Divinity. In today's exclusive interview, we have a well-known member of the Sri Sathya Sai Central Trust with us. His association with the Sai Avatar began in 1975, and today, 37 years later, he continues to serve the Sai mission in a key capacity. Sri K. Chakravarti is a trustee of the Sri Sathya Sai Central Trust here at Prashanthi Nilayam. An overachiever by any yardstick, Mr. Chakravarti got an early head start in life because by the age of 24, he had completed his university education in economics and law, and he had been inducted into the prestigious IAS, or the Indian Administrative Service, and this was in the year 1960. After serving both in the central and the state governments for 15 years, he earned himself a reputation for his competence and integrity. The turning point in his life came in the year 1975 when Mr. Chakravarti was posted as the collector of the Anantapur district in Andhra Pradesh, the very same jurisdiction within which lies Puttaparthi. On his very first visit to Prashanthi Nilayam, he had an opportunity for a one-on-one with the Lord of Puttaparthi, and Bhagwan's very first words to him were, "I may be new to you, but you're not new to me." Prophetic indeed was the declaration, as it led to a completely unplanned and unscheduled detour in the life of the Chakravarti family. At the peak of his professional life, at the age of 45, Mr. Chakravarti shifted his gears from IAS to SAI. In the grand story of the Sri Sathya Sai Avatar, many devotees have played key roles, and one such person is Mr. Chakravarti. First, as the registrar of the Sri Sathya Sai Institute of Higher Learning, later as the secretary of the Sri Sathya Sai Central Trust, and now as a trustee of the same trust. Sai Ram, Mr. Chakravarti, and welcome to Tryst with Divinity on Radio Sai.
Thank you very much.
So you're one of the most seen and perhaps talked about office bearers of the ashram, and yet you have remained very private and media averse. During the period when Bhagwan was hospitalized, your name was making headline news on a daily basis, but we never heard from you. So let me start off by thanking you for coming down to our studio for this conversation. Let's talk about life before and after that fateful day when Bhagwan was rushed to the Super Speciality Hospital, March 28, 2011. As the secretary of the trust and his close devotee, what do you recall of that day?
All that we can say is we were all traumatized. I was there at home, just then come from Prashanthi Nilayam, and half an hour later I got a frantic call from Yajur Mandir saying that Swami is to be rushed to the hospital and that I should get back to Yajur Mandir. Hardly 5 minutes, not even that I suppose, I was back in Yajur Mandir, and we had to arrange the ambulance. The doctors were there and Swami had to be brought down, and it's all a fairly sort of hectic time. And our reactions were rather slow because however much we knew that Swami was not well, we are not mentally prepared to sort of see Swami in a condition in which he had to be rushed to the hospital in an ambulance. And I think my mind was blank. All that I could do was I just showed to Swami that I'm following his ambulance.
In your car?
In my car. So I went behind Swami's ambulance in my car.
Bhagwan was awake and conscious at this time?
As he came down, he was in a chair, we had to really take him in.
Sitting in his chair.
So I think it was quite visible. To what extent could things around him have registered is very difficult to say. When we presume that he was, I think, in a condition in which he was at least be aware of what was around him, who were around him. That's how it happened.
And the days that followed, obviously they were very difficult for everybody, especially so for the members of the trust. Constant media attention, and then the responsibility of handling the situation in the hospital. What do you recall? If you don't want to revisit them, that's fine too.
Not that. It is a question of being caught unawares, firstly, because of whatever it is not as though that we were planning to take Swami to the hospital for long treatment, etc. So maybe I think we were all, at least I was always hoping that there'll be some unknown, mysterious way in which a Swami would pull himself up, and therefore there would be no need for him to go to the hospital. And having gone to the hospital and I've been told that his condition is serious, therefore it's a question of waiting during those days. Even in other normal cases, people would expect recovery of their loved ones.
Of course.
Here was a case where I suppose, more than he being beloved of many, there's always a question of the extraordinary power by which he will recover himself. At one level, your mind says that you've got to go through the normal procedures. At another level, I suppose you are not prepared to believe that these are things which have got to be done, as in the case of ordinary patient. Therefore, it's very difficult for any person, not only me. I think it would have been the normal reaction of many people there. So it became, a very prolonged stay. And a prolonged stay means you can think of it as a time for recovery. You can also think that perhaps it is going downhill, physical condition being what it is. So it is very difficult to sort of look back and say precisely, this is a moment in which hope was lost.
Understandably. And then once the Mahasamadhi happened on April the 24th, 2011, millions of devotees around the world, for them, life just changed in a trice. But in your case, it was even harder because you had the loss, the grief, as well as the added responsibility to handle, because the entire world was descending into Puttaparthi. What was going through your mind?
I didn't think that I was in any way responsible for handling many things which are happening around. And no one could have thought that he's going to handle it single-handedly. Many people...
But you were the secretary of the trust.
Secretary of the trust. In terms of working out the details of it, as to when the body should be received and who will take it in, how long do we keep it. Those are details which I think, had to be done in a way because either mechanically you do it or you do it because you have been at a long training of handling situations. Therefore, this in any case was such a life-changing happening in the whole ashram, not only for me but for everyone around, and perhaps for people who have not been around also. But then, as I said, I was not the only person. There are a lot of others who were also in the hospital during those critical days. And all of us had to sort of speak amongst them, talk amongst themselves, and see what should be done. And when we knew that very soon, because even before the end came, there were lots of inquiries from people, from the Prime Minister's office, from the Chief Minister's office, things of that nature which normally are expected. And as soon as the end came, we knew that we have to arrange for their coming and paying their lost respect, homage to Bhagwan. So all those things were handled in a way in which normally activities in the ashram are handled. When the VIPs come or when people, a large congregation of devotees comes. But this was a totally different type of congregation, totally different type of visit of the very important persons in the country. But as I said, we knew that this has to be gone through. And I think all the people who are connected with this in one way or the other must have gone through in their own mind, I suppose, that this is something which mentally we were not prepared to accept.
It's very hard to draw that strength in moment of grief and loss, and to stay together and think of the logistics. I can't even think of a head of state who has had such a send-off.
You see, in certain cases like that, you prepare, in advance as to what should be done, what should be the protocol. In the case of Bhagwan, it is rather difficult because if you start preparing, it looks as though they have accepted the inevitable, and you do not allow for a margin of mystery.
Yes.
And if you don't do anything at all, it looks as though they have been careless in handling a situation. So it is very difficult to prepare and to stay not prepared.
Yes, a fine line.
Either way, people can say that, well, they knew much earlier and they did not prepare. Or they can say they should have foreseen but they didn't. So it is a very difficult situation.
Understandably so,
So
yes.
I think this must have been the reaction of many people connected with that. If you prepare, well, you can be told that you didn't share that information with all of us. And if you hope against hope that things are going to improve and still the worst follows, I'll say that you have been singularly inefficient in anticipating and providing for.
We talk of walking on a razor's edge. Now, during this period, sir, suddenly the trust was making a lot of headline news, and it was often being described as the all-powerful Sri Sathya Sai Central Trust with global assets worth some astronomical amount, and the spotlight was on the trustees from both the media and the devotees. Yet, it appears you consciously chose to lie low and stay away from the limelight. Why? Was that a considered decision?
Now, I think there are a few things in this. Many of the comments which I found in the press had not been based on information, on facts.
Very true.
And none of the people who had written anything had met me or, for that matter, any of the trustees earlier to ascertain what are the facts about what they're going to write. So I think it was more in the area of speculation as to what the trust in terms of its property is worth. The difficulty at the time is that when people write that the Central Trust has assets running into thousands of crores, it could really be an instance of utter incredulity for us. I mean, we know what the situation is. We know how much assets are there. So that's why we had to wait for some time until all these things come to a certain sense of normalcy to address the press and to give them a complete picture of what the Central Trust assets are and what its income is, and number of things which are not directly connected with the Central Trust might have been possibly attributed by the press. And we had to possibly bring to their notice that there are a number of organizations all over the country and the world which bears Sri Sathya Sai name. They are not directly connected with the Central Trust as an entity. And we have to tell them there are Sri Sathya Sai State Trusts, there are other sister trusts, and there is an organization abroad which is not a legal entity because you have Sri Sathya Sai International Organization. These are all, again, are totally outside the purview of the Central Trust, and we have to inform that the territorial jurisdiction of the Central Trust is only India. And Sri Sathya Sai Central Trust is one organization which does not own any property in any part of the world other than India. So I think these must have come possibly as a surprise to them, but at the same time having made wild guesses about the worth of the trust, perhaps they didn't want to revisit those figures and come to a certain understanding of the facts as they were put out to them.
It must have been a very difficult time for the trust to grapple with the situation on the ground as well as the negative media attention. Did you all strategize and think of how to handle it?
See, the question is that it is not the Central Trust alone that was being asked to, I mean, you can say that we should have people who are connected to the Central Trust to give some facts and figures. Now, immediately after such great traumatic event for all of us, it was not possible for us to come and meet the press in a very cold-blooded way and say that these are the facts. So we had to really allow for all people to really sort of settle down, as it were.
Because some closure was
So
required.
you need to really have also, I think, to gather one's wits, as it were, you know, under such circumstances, and then together say, look, what are the things? And then when these things are asked, this is happening, that happened, things like that, we had to really think in terms of giving a write-up itself. There's no point in just giving. We gave a write-up and said that these are the facts.
Yes, and the annual report.
This is the land that we have. These are the buildings. These are connected with the work. The lands were given by governments of Andhra Pradesh and governments of Karnataka. And these are also specific purposes. And those purposes are being carried out, have been carried out by Bhagwan till now, and will be continued to be carried out by the Central Trust. So, and then we have to say, if you talk in terms of the value of assets, we have to say, you will find in our books of accounts as zero, because these are all given free. And today's market value may be anything you can compute. But then these are not real estate in the sense in which we sell the property, make money, or do anything of that nature. These are linked to certain obligations on the part of the Central Trust. If land has been given by the government of Andhra Pradesh for Anantapur campus, it has been run even by then for more than 30 years as a university.
Very true.
And even earlier as a college. And this is a continuing obligation of the Central Trust. We have to do that, take care of it and ensure that the campus of the university there runs. Similarly, if there is a land given by the government of Karnataka government of Karnataka to the Central Trust for putting up a building for housing the super specialty hospital, well, it again is an obligation. They have given land, yes, but that was also once again upon a condition that we will run a free hospital. So in fact, you should look at it not as an asset, it is an obligation that along with a certain thing that has been made out by the government, there was an obligation attached to it. And I think this fact, it takes time for people to understand that if you have some acres and you don't multiply by the current market value and say that this is asset value, etc. And even there again in books of accounts it will be shown or whatever value in which it was given. So I think it took time for people to understand that the value of the property which they had given had no basis on facts pertaining to the Central Trust.
How do these verticals, the Sri Sathya Sai organization, the State Trust and the Central Trust, how do these verticals intersect?
See, there are two ways of looking at it. Bhagwan had made it clear that organization to which he blessed or permitted them to use his name, Sri Sathya Sai, was more for the sake of devotees getting together and engage themselves in service, not for the sake of Bhagwan, but for the sake of their self-fulfillment. After all, what's the purpose of doing service? It is not for Swami's sake. By doing work in a public community, it could be in form of value education, in non-formal setup like Bal Vikas. It could be by way of bhajan mandals, where people could congregate and then sing the glory of God, or organize medical camps or veterinary camps in order to provide some relief to the people in those areas. All these things are not meant merely to give relief to people, or emotionally or physically. It is also meant to really refine oneself and to be engaged in the service of God, and also promote a sense of selflessness in human beings, so that you not only care for yourself and your immediate family, but you are expanding yourself by thinking about others, by doing work for others. So this enlarges the devotee's vision of what he is meant to be. And I think Swami made it clear that these organizations are meant, whether it is in a district level, state level, these are all some of the things which have got to be done from the point of view of giving a cohesion to the setup. Now you have a district level, there are a set of devotees who get together and organize. Similarly at the state level, then all the states put together an All India organization. And similarly organizations in different countries. But they're all meant to be for the sake of doing not only social service, but also for promoting one's own spirituality. So here is an organization which is a spiritual organization, but from Swami's point of view, spirituality is best attained through service. Therefore, it's a spiritual organization, it's a service organization. And the basis of it is spirituality. The expression of it is service.
Mm-hmm. And the Sri Sathya Sai Seva Organization of India, for instance, it's a sister organization in some ways to the Central Trust. How do the two connect?
They are not sister organizations in the way in which a Central Trust is understood. You see, a Central Trust is a body which is governed by, let us say, the laws of the land, especially Income Tax Act. Or let's say the Religious Endowments Trust Act. These are all laws which govern the setting up and the functioning of the trusts in the country, in the state. So the Central Trust has to apply for income tax exemption, for donations received. The people who give money as donors have to get eligibility to deduct their income for tax purposes. That means you have to get an exemption from the Income Tax Commissioner. Similarly, if you're to carry on work as a charitable trust in the state of Andhra Pradesh, for instance, there is a AP State Religious and Endowments Act. So these have to be fulfilled. And all the activities are to conform to these provisions. And whatever reports were to be submitted periodically to the government in the center and in the state, they have to be complied with. Now, for instance, another act which is the foreign currency regulations. Now, not only our trust, but many trusts in the country receive donations from abroad. And they are supposed to be regulated by the Foreign Contribution Regulation Act. So we have to sort of send our returns to the Government of India. So these are things which are to be done in a legal way, accounted for and complied with. The Sri Sathya Sai organization has no relevance in this context.
It's a seva-based organization.
They are this is a congregation of devotees.
True.
And they have their local activities. And then in order to facilitate some of these activities, there are also state trusts.
Yes.
Now, the state trust, similarly, as in the case of central trust, also applies for exemption from the government's consent and carry on their activities in the manner in which they ought to be done. Now, if any activities at the state level are to be done, then it is possible that those who are organizing these various functions, or let's say medical camps, they give a budget that this is what is required to be done. And the state trust is in a position, let us say, to extend that assistance. They do so. But the idea is that there should not be a collection of funds in an unaccountable way. Mm-hmm. Now, people cannot sort of say that we're going to do this and we'll collect money and do it. That leads to a tremendous amount of lack of accountability. So that should be systematically done. It should be done in a way in which, things are transparent, and no activities are done by way of a local collection, which is likely to really harm the reputation of an organization which bears the name of Sathya Sai. So the organization has its relevance. Now, for instance, you look at the volunteers. After all, it's maybe the biggest spiritual voluntary organization in the country.
Mm-hmm. The Sevadals.
Sevadal. Now, this Sevadal, for instance, plays a very major role in maintenance of the hospitals, especially super specialty hospital. If you take, both men and women volunteers take a lot of responsibility in keeping the whole place clean and tidy. In general hospitals, they do. In the ashram. Now,
and the museums,
everywhere,
the school.
all institutions organized into school, college, and general security, then be of use to the large number of devotees who come. We don't use the word crowd here. Mm-hmm. We use the word congregation because it's a congregation of it's not a crowd. These are all people who come out of love and reverence to Swami. They need some assistance here and there, whether it's a question of being seated or going into a canteen for food or perhaps buying books. So these are any activity within the ashram also has to be sort of regulated in a way in which people find it easy to get things done. And these volunteers, Sevadal people, and then you take a major activity like with 23rd November birthday celebrations, and Swami was there, the number of congregation, the people who come are, not counted because you just don't count people, the heads, etc. But you see a vast sea of faces, and those people have to be taken care of, whether it is a water distribution in the Hillview Stadium. Every activity which you can think of is all done by these volunteers
who
are part of the Sri Sathya Sai Seva organization.
Yes.
They come from different parts of the country. And if you look at the national integration element of this, it's a very revealing thing, because people from different parts of the country, from different states, come on a rotation basis. I do not know whether there is a similar organization in the country in which people from different parts of the country come and render such voluntary service. And what is it that they gain? They spend the money, but the type of satisfaction they get by rendering this service, according to them, must be far more than the monetary value of the trip. By coming and going back, they would have spent some money. But I think it is more than compensated.
And used up their holiday time,
and then with the children.
Time, yes.
But it is not merely considered as a vacation. It is considered
seva.
As a seva. It's something which uplifts them.
Yeah, totally.
It's not merely a question of coming and going. It's a question of participating in a setup in which the higher instincts of men are touched by the very presence of Swami.
And even to date, because as the daughter of two lifelong Sevadals, I can say Sevadals look forward to coming to Parthi as a great spiritual blessing.
It is, I think, that's what Swami used to say. The visiting this place itself is a source of strength. I mean, used to use, the language of recharging one's battery. But the idea is that you come here once a year at least and feel uplifted, ennobled. You are part of something, a wider whole. And it invests the person's life with a very special meaning and significance. It is not to be measured by ordinary things with which we normally measure our activities in the normal world.
Very true. Let's talk about the trust once again. Now that the mainstream media attention has reduced, there are some questions that still linger in the minds of our devotees. For instance, since the Mahasamadhi, what steps has the trust taken to re-engineer itself for preserving, nurturing and expanding the legacy of Bhagwan Baba?